pay for doing this to me?" Abram replied, "Since she's your servant, you may deal with her as you see fit." So Sarai treated her harshly, and Hagar ran away. This is the word of the Lord. What a promising start to a series on heroes. Today I'm going to highlight just two things that I want to draw our attention to about heroes themselves, and we're going to touch on a couple of thoughts about the character of God. We join Abram and Sarai, whose names later become Abraham and Sarah, the spiritual parents of the Jewish and Christian faiths. Their story begins in Genesis chapter 12 and it ends in Genesis chapter 25. If you have never read it in order, can I encourage you to either read or listen to it? It is an absolute page turner. God has promised them that he will make them into a great nation and that via their descendants, all the nations on the earth will be blessed. But by the time we join them in chapter 15, they've already been waiting at least a decade for God to move and for Sarah to become pregnant. So they decide to take matters into their own hands in a plot that would not be out of place in a soap opera. Are they heroes of the faith? Yes, they are. They follow God. They learn to trust him. They're changed by their encounters with him. They see him do incredible things. Are they the heroes of this particular story? Absolutely not. Here's my first point. Heroes get it wrong. This is where the stories of the Old Testament can get a bit confusing, because sometimes the writer will help us to interpret what's actually happening by saying something helpful like, "And this was evil in the sight of the Lord." Like, thank you. Okay, moving on. I understand what's going on now. But sometimes the writer thinks that you can use your own brain to figure it out. Does God approve of you using other people like puppets to further your own agenda? No, he does not. Is it right behavior to lash out at others and blame them for the consequences of your very own actions? No, it is not. The writer thinks you can figure this out for yourself, so he doesn't make any comment. But just in case you're tempted to think, hang on, Teresa, this is Abraham and Sarah we're talking about here. God is with them. There's an extraordinary call on their lives. Surely we can just skim over this as a blip in an otherwise fantastic story. Well, then the writer has left you some helpful clues embedded in the story itself to help you see how serious an error this is. They've done this by highlighting the ways that Abraham and Sarah are now repeating the mistakes made by their ancestors, Adam and Eve, in the Garden of Eden. And I've made you a little table here. So we've got Genesis chapter 3. It's a very teacher moment for me. I made a table. Genesis chapter 3. Eve took the apple. Eve gave the apple to Adam. Adam listens to Eve. Eve blames someone else. Genesis chapter 16, you can see, repeats the pattern almost perfectly. And to clinch it, the writer makes sure he uses the exact same Hebrew words there in bold. They want you to be in no doubt that this is a train wreck. Abraham and Sarah use the call of God on their lives to justify using Hagar as a means to an end. They do not consult God. They do not consult Hagar. It's a strange place to start a series on heroes. But over the next few weeks, if we're going to be looking at the giants of the faith, then let's do it with our eyes wide open to the ways that the line between hero and villain sometimes becomes a little blurry. So how do we respond to a story like this? Our heroes have let us down badly. Well, on the one hand, it's profoundly reassuring. If God is prepared to work with these humans who mess up this badly, then we can be very hopeful that he will work in our lives despite all our shortcomings and all our poor decisions. 2 Timothy chapter 2 in the New Testament says that even when we are faithless, he is faithful. The Amplified Version puts it like this: even when we are faithless, he remains true to his word and his righteous character. What a relief to discover that God's grace and mercy and goodness and faithfulness and the fulfillment of his promises and his generosity depend on his character and not on mine. I know he will keep showing up for me. I know he will keep showing up for you because that's who he is at a fundamental level. And it's absolutely right and true that we take that from this story. God sticks with us through our mistakes. But I don't think that's the immediate thing that the writer wants us to see. Because this is also a story about how even people with extraordinary calls on their life can mess up. And when they do, people can get seriously hurt. To simply say, oh, Abraham and Sarah, they made a mistake, but God is merciful, so that's okay, doesn't quite cut it, does it? Because it glosses over the injustice that we've seen in this story. And the writer has written his story so as to draw your attention to that injustice, not sweep it under the carpet. The real question then becomes not so much how am I going to respond to this story, but what will God do? Because actually when we see what God will do, that helps us understand how we're supposed to respond, right? It's almost as though we're watching a paramedic attend the scene of a major incident. I'm curious to know who will be his first priority in this mess as he dispenses his mercy. Let's carry on reading. Genesis chapter 16, verse 7. Hagar has run away. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress Sarai, she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her. The angel added, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. The angel of the Lord also said to her, you are now pregnant and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. And my favorite line, he will be a wild donkey of a man. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. Again and again in Scripture, we'll encounter a God who turns up to fight for the powerless, the mistreated, the ones that society has decided are invisible or disposable, even if that means coming against his own people to do so. Consider Psalm 68, which says, "A father of the fatherless, a defender of widows is God in his holy habitation." Or Psalm 146, "The Lord watches over the strangers." Or Exodus 22, "If you afflict the fatherless or the widow in any way, and they cry to me at all, I will surely hear their cry." It's Hagar that God prioritizes in this mess. She is a slave about 500 miles away from home and family, effectively fatherless, a stranger in a foreign land. As a slave and as a woman, she has very few rights, almost no options, and she is entirely dependent on Abraham and Sarah for her welfare. So it's Hagar that God pursues into the desert, because his first priority is always the least powerful person. And Hagar's response to God at this time is what Abraham and Sarah's response should have been all along. Here's my second point. Heroes take God at his word. In this story, the only person who takes God at his word is Hagar. The reason that we're in this mess is because Sarah, and by extension Abraham, have grown tired of believing that God will keep his promise to them. But Hagar believes God so wholeheartedly that she's prepared to return to her life as a slave in order to see those promises come true. In their conversation, God makes Hagar two specific promises. The first is that she'll have more descendants than she can count. 2 Timothy 2 says that even when we are faithless, God remains true to his word. And God's given his word to Abraham that his descendants will be too many to count. Hagar wasn't supposed to be part of that plan, but now she is, and her child is included. Her descendants will be too many to count. God's second promise is that her son, Ishmael, will be as untamed as a wild donkey, which is not the usual congratulations you offer pregnant ladies. And as a rule, you should avoid comparing people's children to donkeys, okay? Definite truth there. But the key words here, of course, are wild and untamed. The son of a slave is born a slave. But the son of Hagar, she is promised, will be wild, unharnessed, free. God essentially promises Hagar that although she has been treated as invisible, that is not her destiny, and that he will make her descendants unignorable, both in character and number. It's mercy and it's justice. Hagar takes God at his word. And that makes her a better candidate, not a perfect candidate, but a better candidate for being the hero of this story. Did you know that Hagar is the first woman that God is recorded as speaking to since Eve? For those biblical geeks among you, that's 20 biblical generations. Ishmael is the first man that God directly names since Adam. And that Hagar is the first person, man or woman, to give God a name based on her personal experience of him. El Roi, the God who sees me. What a powerful and personal and intimate encounter it must have been that Hagar, who has been treated as so unimportant, can say, I've seen the God who sees me. We're going to have an opportunity to respond to God's word to us this evening. Heroes do get it wrong. Extraordinary tales about giants of the faith, stopping rainfall and being saved from savage beasts are all well and good. But if some of those people are not sometimes a bit thick, a bit selfish, a bit scheming, a bit impatient, then I'm not sure how relevant their stories are to me. I need to see that God sticks with people like me. As we were just in our prayer time today, Claire was talking about the forgiveness of God, the grace of God, the mercy of God that continues and continues and continues to extend to us. And I wonder if there is anyone here who thinks that God maybe has given up on them because their mistakes are too big or too many. 2 Timothy 2 says that even when we are faithless, God remains true to his righteous character. I know that he will stick with me. I know that he will stick with you because that is who he is. If that's something that resonates with you this evening, then maybe it's time to come and get some prayer because God said it twice now. Like the writer of this story, we refuse to sweep the failures of our heroes under the rug because having an amazing call on your life does not excuse wrong behavior towards other people. Instead, we ask God to help us to respond like he does, prioritizing mercy and justice to the people who have been hurt. If that resonates with you, perhaps come and ask for some prayer. El Roy, the God who sees me. This is such a precious name of God. You may be familiar with some of the different names that God is known by in the Bible. This is the first, El Roy, the God who sees me. Our destiny is to be seen and heard by the God of the universe. So if there's anyone here who is feeling powerless or voiceless because of a situation they're in, or because of a situation that they were once in that continues to echo into the present, then please do come and get some prayer because God is the God who sees you. And finally, heroes take God at his word. Can it be that simple? That the way to see God do extraordinary things is to believe what he says. Sarah, Abraham, Hagar, they all waited a long time for God to come through for them. Maybe you've been waiting a long time to see an answer to prayer. And you need somebody to stand with you this evening so that you have the energy and the faith to keep on going, to keep on believing that God will come through. If there's anything else, please do come and get some prayer a little later on. Thanks, guys.